session on case studies from UK and India. This session will be moderated by Mr. Dev Mukherjee. And just to share with you all, as we are having this program here at this venue, this is simultaneously being streamed live also, so we have, viewers online. So, Mr. Mukherjee, I would request you, sir, to please take the session forward.
Not quite the afternoon, still it's morning, so welcome back, and welcome to a more intensive session now, which is largely focusing on partnerships, collaborations, sharing of best practices, learnings between India and the UK, between businesses, between academia, and most importantly, I think, amongst all of us. It's a discussion that we would like to have, as I mentioned earlier in the opening remarks, bottom up, where each one of us is a stakeholder in this journey. And that's imperative. And therefore, just to recapitulate, what the observation I made right at the beginning, that an expansive definition of the journey towards low carbon neutrality or net zero needs to be set in context, in an expansive sense of the term, and has to recognize the constraints and realities on the ground with the common objective of achieving, shall we say, a good and a better place to live in. Therefore, given this background and picking up the threads from the last session, we would be focusing in this session on case studies and, to an extent, best practices in a twofold objective, if I may say. It's a twofold, top-down in terms of policy and initiatives, bottom-up in terms of action. Because action needs to be driven by certain imperatives on the ground. If those imperatives do not come, action doesn't happen. And trusting policy without understanding, appreciating, or feeling the pulse, so to speak, on the ground will not yield sustainable outcome. Therefore, this dovetailing becomes very crucial. Now, how does that happen? It's a very dynamic situation where this bottom-up approach and top-down policy need to dovetail very nicely, cleverly over a period of time. As we all know, getting to specifics, about 3/4 of the carbon, so to speak, comes from energy sources, maybe more than 3/4. And there are a number of ways, to put it very, very simply, in simple terms. We would always like to keep things simple. The initiatives that need to happen would be two. Again, there are two options. It's binary. Either you reduce carbon or you offset. Now, the offset happens through, carbon sequestration, capturing carbon, etc. And it was very heartening to note from you, Mr. Bala, sir, when you said that there are certain practices historically in this state and in this part of the world where we actually embrace and practice, in a way, carbon sequestration. Now, in terms of reduction of carbon, there are different initiatives we have taken. The government has taken, businesses have taken. Of course, we have talked about renewables. We have talked about bioresources, green hydrogen, biofuels, etc. But a very, very important aspect which I think we need to keep in mind, and which actually is a very sensitive touch point to other aspects that touch on low carbon dialogue, is behavioral response and demand management or energy conservation. Now, this is very, very important. I do not know, initially I saw on the program that we'll have a very good representation from CESC. In fact, our incoming president next year is also from CESC. You know, a very important aspect we need to consider, and I hope the panel will touch on this, is on demand response and demand side management. Energy conservation from an individual level, that's an individual, behavioral, to a collective level in terms of businesses and industries, and at a community level, at a state level, and at a national level. And this is a very, very important area where, to my mind, and I think you would agree with me, that we need to look at. I would just give a few pointers, and maybe the panel could also, in their case studies, or they could make any observation. One would be on the building sector. Now, this is very important. India, there's a lot of infrastructure development that's happening, lots of buildings that are coming up. There are lots of standards that are floating around. And to my mind, if I'm not wrong, there are 4 standards that are roughly operating in the country. One is the IGBC standard, the Indian Green Building Council standard. We have the LEED standard. We have the Griha standard. And one standard we do not talk too much about, certainly not on the Calcutta scene, is the ECBC standard, which is the Energy Conservation Building Code, which is the Government of India standard under the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Ministry of Power. Now, let me give you a very simple example. If only we look at commercial buildings in India, just the commercial buildings, the built environment in the commercial sector, if we do a proper baselining today, and we adopt, say, a ECBC standard. I'm not getting into the details of the ECBC standard, because why I've taken ECBC not taken the other 3 standards, not that I'm trying to promote ECBC here, but the reason is it has a specific focus on energy and a specific focus on thermal comfort, because wellness of people is also important when it comes to buildings, because that's your living environment. If you have a proper baselining done, and you implement ECBC standard from whatever little I have understood, you would see that if the commercial buildings, if we take in totality in the country, we can reduce energy consumption by 50%, and that is possible, which can reduce energy demand, peak energy demand, and billions of units of electricity consumption, yet maintaining thermal comfort. Let's take a quick jump to our NDCs, nationally determined contributions. A new addition made by India. Let's not go into what Paris said, what Glasgow said. Rather in Glasgow, what our Prime Minister said, that with whatever long-term objectives we have in terms of decarbonization, the pathways, so to speak, which we will be deliberating upon, there would also be lifestyle for environment. And that also becomes important. Responsible consumption. And this is, now India, we need demand consumption. That consumption demand, we need that demand. That is true. It's a growing economy. However, it has to be responsible. And therefore, what the Prime Minister had said was mindful consumption, not mindless consumption. And that is again another touch point that we need to keep in mind. So with sustainability at the heart of any dialogue that we talk, any dialogue on decarbonization, sustainability in terms of outcomes, with a specific focus on wellness of everyone, is imperative. Certainly in the context of India, certainly in the context of UK, certainly in the global context. Another important aspect which I thought I could just raise, apart from what I have just said earlier, is on the finance mechanism. I know Mr. Bala mentioned about finance mechanism, and may I just remind him, whether we like it or not, UK cannot help us with the EU ETS trading or the carbon fund, unfortunately at this point, because UK is out of the scene, so to speak, and there's a little bit of, though they are trying to repair, shall we say. So that's happening, but in a very mild, maybe there's some backdoor diplomacy that's also going on. I was in the UK last week, but let's hope for the best. However, there would be, and there is a talk of green finance and mechanism in India, and there would be a carbon fund coming. That's my prediction. Now, I may be wrong, but there is a talk that's going on. So we, or all you know, Mr. Bala, we might have a fund and a trading mechanism which can bring in the benefits of CDM, if you remember, the Clean Development Mechanism at Kyoto, within the Indian environment. So let's not wish away green finance, it will come. But on this point, there was something I wanted to raise to the corporates. I know Exide is here, my friend Anirban would be coming online from Mahindra's, and they all have their success stories. But what I wanted to know out of sheer curiosity is that, do we have green economy mark in our stock exchange for companies that are getting listed? Are we? Alokda, are we having? I don't think we have. Why not bring that in as a good practice? Think about it. I'll tell you why I mentioned about it, why this cropped up in my mind. The company that I currently work for is a listed company on the London Stock Exchange, and we have a green, it is listed as a green economy marked company. I'm not sure if you're all aware of what this actually means. It means that 50% of your revenues come from services, products, delivery of technology in climate mitigation adaptation, waste, pollution, and circularity. That's circular economy. So an incentive like this, if linked with green finance, I think can be an interesting mechanism whereby we can promote more businesses, firstly, to get into this space, and secondly, to bring in processes. The other point I wanted to make, which you can deliberate upon and possibly you have embedded in your processes, would be efficiency and optimization. Optimization of resources, efficiency in your process. Now, to my mind, there is never a trade-off between optimization and efficiency, though some people think that if you optimize, you sacrifice efficiency. I do not know. That's also something which we can debate upon. But this, I feel, is also very important to embrace efficiency primarily from an energy perspective and also from a resource perspective. Because that is something which, again, in our journey, in any discourse on a low-carbon pathway journey, becomes important, whether it is just your energy or your waste or your other resources, including water, because there is a symbiotic relationship between power and water. Anyway, we have 6 distinguished speakers, and I would like to welcome individually Dr. Sagar Modi, who is here, Nikki and Maggie, Dr. Nikki Black, Professor Maggie Rowe from Newcastle University. There was a time when Newcastle was second home to me. I had a business for about 10 years in Newcastle. The university is also known to me a bit, but that was in the 90s. Mr. Saurav Das Patnaik from Swachh Environment, a colleague. Mr. Anirban Ghosh, my dear friend. Anirban, are you there online?
Yes, he is.
Oh, yes, I can see you.
Yes, I am.
Hi. And Shri Pankaj Kumar Gupta from NTPC. Welcome you, sir. So the way we will structure it, Angana, if it's all right, maybe 10 to 12 minutes each, and then it can also give us a bit of time for interaction amongst ourselves, and of course, and very importantly, with the audience. So what I would beseech you, if I may say, if you can cut down your presentation to maybe 7-8 minutes, then it gives us a real 10 to 15 minutes of, as one would like to call it, solid interaction. Thank you very much. May I now request Dr. Sagar Modi to share the best practices from the UK from his institute. Over to you, sir.
Sure. Not me, just please. Extra duplicate one. Okay. Nope. Thank you. Namaskar. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Sagar Modi from Cenex. I am basically a technical consultant for EVI strategy. So my area of focus is transport, of course, but from the infrastructure side. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone here, and especially Mr. Deb for giving such a good welcome to this session and to all of us. And a great thanks to the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and the UK government for making all of this happen. I'm going to try and really take Mr. Deb's points on board and try to speed this up. So you have a chance to ask questions and we have a chance to interact. But very quickly, just for everybody's context, what is Cenex? We are the Center of Excellence, as has been said before, in the morning as well. But we were established in 2005 by the UK government back then. And since then, we've become an independent research and technology organization and a consultancy. And we are independent, not-for-profit experts in this area. Mainly low carbon and zero carbon transport since the times when it wasn't so cool and in the trend. So we've got loads and loads of experience in this area. Today, I'm going to speed through a few things. So apologies if it's too quick, but that gives you a chance to ask questions and be more than happy to answer them. I'm going to go quickly over the UK net zero situation and the strategy. Many of you must know and have read, but we will still go through that. And what I'm going to take out of each of these 4 different parts is to ensure that there is something to take away here in terms of a summary as to how you can take this forward, right? That's what this is all about. Then, of course, my area of expertise, which is zero emission transport in the UK and related infrastructure, and then we'll summarize. So I'm not going to dwell on this slide too much. We all know what net zero is. That's why we're here. I think it's important to know that it's undeniable. I think the more we say it, the more it becomes reality, certain things. But the fact is that it's not choice anymore. Again, as eloquently put in the morning by Mr. Peter Cook and everybody else. So the idea is to reduce emissions to as close to zero as possible. Let's not go into semantics today. There's a lot of time to talk about that in more focused workshops, though it's important to note that this must be done by the middle of the century. And there are a few differences across the world for the right reasons. Context. Again, as Mr. Deb put it, it is the same goal that we want to achieve, but we have to respect the differences and make sure we do something to ensure that those differences are taken into account so we can implement things in the right way unevenly, because it's going to happen unevenly. So, the UK net zero situation. First thing's important is that net zero is about everything. So, all sectors have to play a part. Power, fuel supply, hydrogen, as everybody talks about, the industry, heat and buildings, as Mr. Deb pointed out as well. We'll talk about building codes probably in the interaction. Transport, natural resources, and GHG removals. We've spoken about natural resources before as well. Things like woodland rates, but we also talked about carbon sinks, thanks to Mr. Bala this morning. All of that is important. So really, how can it be achieved, right? So you need to take a systems approach to policy making. This is part of the UK net zero strategy, but actually, in reality, it is very, very true as well. So it is supported on the basis of a lot of thinking, a lot of studies, but it really, really is important. Everything has to come together. Everything has to balance each other out. You can't have policies in one area that derail another, because that's not going to achieve the outcome. So we need to be outcome oriented. The outcome is we want net zero for all of us, not just for industry, not just for the building sector, not just for transport, but it's going to be uneven. Again, I bring that uneven in because there are differences not only in all these sectors, but there are differences in every country. Every country has to achieve this, right? We need to deliver at pace. So it's not just about deliberation and long, long hours and days and months and years of policy design, because you could design the perfect policy, but by the time you've designed the perfect policy, it's too late. So we need to strike a balance in between doing things really, really well and just doing things in an agile way. So there's a different approach to policy making now, which is agile. You need to do something based on the knowledge you have today, the best of the best knowledge you have today, do something and be adaptable. Things are going to change. The world is changing very, very quickly. We're in waters that we don't know as well. The reason we're in waters we don't know as well is our own mistake, because we've taken this long to recognize that climate change is undeniable, right? So we're in a position where now we have to do something in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years that we could have been doing over the last 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years, right? So we need to account for this. Quickly create policies, understand those policies are going to change. So have good milestones and review points. Come back and change things. Because ground level realities are so different from the top level realities. And you must match those, and you won't be able to match those at all points in time. So we've got to recognize this, and every country's got to recognize this. This is not just about India or the UK. This is, every country has this issue, right? I've already said this point before. Mitigate conflicts in policy. So one policy can't derail another. You can't do something on the transport side that is going to completely obliterate something you're trying to do on the carbon sink side, or, you know, something on the GHG removal side, for example. And lastly, the takeaway is, ambition is great. You can have great ambitious policies, but it has to go hand in hand with implementation pathways. Real, tangible, possible implementation pathways that take community, people, social, political, everything into account, not just technical, not just industry. This is a point that a lot of people say is technical, is too detailed, but I love to mention it because I think without this, we are lost. As I said, we have to do something in 10 years in a really compressed period of time, 20 and 30 in some cases. But achieving this is not going to be possible if all the sectors don't have the data they need to work on. How do you not get into conflicts with other policies if you don't know what the other policies are based on? You need the right data, and that data needs to be open to a vast part of the ecosystem. We're all stakeholders in this, again, Mr. Depp's point. So data has to be available to everyone. We have to work on making data available to everyone. There are a lot of challenges in this area because data is valuable, hence also an industry, but how do you balance that along with open data access? And to what level open data access, and how is that implemented? Again, I'll keep focusing on implementation. It's one thing to set a specification. It is one thing to talk top to bottom about it. But what's the implementation pathway to a database that is open? How does it work? How is everybody reimbursed for what is valuable and they are providing, et cetera, right? So now I'm going to come to transport, which is my expertise side. And why transport? Because guess what? It's still the worst performing sector when it comes to net zero. I mean, can't deny it. The graphs say it, anybody you ask will say it. So really, the focus has to be there. Now, that's not in conflict with the fact that net zero is about everything. So everything needs to balance itself. But differences. This sector is really bad. So let's do something about it. What has the UK been doing? Decarbonizing transport. Now, I use the word transport because it's holistic again, right? It's not just about cars and vans. But guess what? We've made a lot of progress in cars and vans. We are yet to make progress on the other side. Now, this is very natural. Ground realities are so different in India. I think something like over 80% of our mix is about four-wheelers, which is not true for India, right? Hence, the policies in India targeted very much to the low-hanging fruit, right? Which is two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and so on, working upwards, which is perfectly fine. And so, again, we need to recognize that difference. But it's not about transport. In the long term, it is also about how many cars, how many things do we need on the street, right? Can some of those journeys be done in other ways? Can public transport be bolstered enough to get people out of personal vehicles to a degree, understanding that independence is necessary for us all? So what has the UK done? The milestones. One is the 2030 ICE engine vehicle ban. That has made a big difference. That's part not just the fact that it's a bit of a stick, but the fact that it's also working as encouragement. So sectors where people would have been really apprehensive to make changes because technology is really expensive, now have little choice but to start thinking about making that change in time. So incentive plus disincentive. You need both. And it's really working. The second is at the local level, is the recognition of the fact that climate change is a problem. And so suddenly we had 300 local governments go, there is now a climate emergency. Acceptance is the first step. Once it's been accepted, then you can start bringing change in, but it also means it goes up into hand about badges of honor. So which local government wants to do better than the other? That's one little small element of that, a healthy competition, if I were to say it that way. But green credentials, they're important, and we need to make them important. We have to work to make that an important thing. It's not just about the economy. The economy has to be balanced out with the reality that this has to be done. So we have to make changes we may not be happy about, right? So the shift to EVs. So what that context has done in the UK is private vehicles, company fleets, company cars, which, as I said, majority cars and vans, are shifting. And the shift is in line with our projections for what we need for the 2030 ban to work, right? So what we need in terms of the EV uptake by 2030, it's on track. The challenge is naturally the prices of the EVs are still very high, and the EV infrastructure. So now what we've done is we've got the EVs on the road coming. What do we do about the infrastructure? A focus quickly on national and local transport policies. Now, grants, which is a familiar topic here as well, grants have worked, okay? But there was a phased approach to grants, which also is good, could have been better in terms of how it was phased out, though don't be worried about phasing them out. But again, you need to have a strategy as to what points, what milestones you want to achieve in your numbers over a period of time to enact those changes. Low emission zones. Now this is a difficult policy scenario, okay? So low emission zones, for those who don't know it, are demarked zones in certain cities where the air quality is so bad that certain vehicles are not allowed within that zone without having to pay essentially a tax on coming into that zone if you're coming in certain vehicles that are either too old, and then making sure that EVs can come in for free. So incentive plus disincentive. Not just incentivizing the fact that EVs can be bought, and so you get a subsidy to buy them, but also the disincentive on you can't bring ICE vehicles into certain zones. It's working, but let's not be fooled, it was very, very difficult to make it happen. And currently the expansion of such zones is also very, very difficult because there's a people element here. So how do you do that really well? Important to note that there needs to be consultation with ground level. A lot of consultation has been done to figure out what support is needed for such policies to work. A quick one about commercial vehicles and fleets. So there have been no targeted policies to really get commercial vehicles and fleets to convert, but that's still happening because of the earlier aforementioned context, the 2030 coming ban, which means that they have to basically do something about this, right? And so the carrot and stick approach, there is an incentive and a disincentive, and so they're going away and getting companies like us to do fleet assessments to figure out how they can best switch. There are things to think about in fleet conversion, which is, duty cycles are different for every kind of fleet. How do you account for that? What are the available cars which can fit into that, or two-wheelers, or three-wheelers, which can fit into that makeup? Figuring out the baselines of data, and then optimizing the way those cars are able to go and do those duty cycles so there is no downtime, because downtime is the biggest factor for commercial fleets, as you know. So you want very little or no downtime. You don't want to change your current makeup, and yet you want to make it happen with electric vehicles or electric vans or electric scooters or whatever have you. It can work, but it is about going away, modeling, figuring things out, trying to optimize it, and then realizing that it's not all about putting loads of rapid chargers and buying 50 vehicles where you actually might be able to do with 25 vehicles and just 3 rapid chargers, So it's about optimization. We don't have the grid over the world to support 25 rapid chargers that are not needed, randomly spiking at different times. It's very difficult for grid side management. So what all of this is doing, as I've said, is that EVs are essentially, we're hitting the targets at the moment, okay? Especially four-wheelers, we're hitting the targets. That is an output from one of our tools, one of our models that is available interactively to all local governments in England. We make that available through a project that we are managing and running for the Office of Zero Emission Vehicles. And therein is an important learning for us as well, that when certain grants and schemes were released earlier, there wasn't enough guidance that was being given to the local authorities who actually had to implement these things. And so we've adapted, and in the next scheme, which is currently running, there is an element of giving essentially not just funds for the capacity and capability to build, but also for resource for upskilling, essentially. And we, as guided experts, have been hired by the government to give that direct implementable guidance to local authorities whenever they need it in their journey towards putting electric vehicle infrastructure. And obviously, so many cars coming onto the road means we need a huge amount of infrastructure. A huge amount of infrastructure comes with a myriad of challenges. The power, how do you put it? Where do you put it? How many do you put? Again, optimization. What is the right amount of them to put and where? And then the age-old question, chicken or the egg. So this is a fight in between OEMs and the EV infrastructure side, where the EV infrastructure side, the private sector says, well, we won't build because there isn't demand. The EV manufacturers sell, well, we're not creating more units because there isn't enough infrastructure out there, because people are saying we won't buy EVs because there isn't enough charging there. So it's about people's anxiety ultimately, and we have this gridlock because of the anxiety of the people. So again, what is needed? Communication with ground level to ensure that they have the confidence to switch. Okay, and then working throughout the ecosystem, national government, local government, and the industry all together to make it work. It can't just happen from one side. It's not just about private sector stepping up. It is not just about national government putting policies down. It is about everything working together. Coordinated effort. So what the UK government has done is obviously they've realized this challenge because people have said we're anxious about infrastructure. So they've gone and put out an infrastructure strategy. I won't dwell on this too much. You can find this anywhere on Google, but if you have questions, I'll really take them. Basically, it's about the people. What did the people want? There was a consultation with the people and with the industry to figure out what is possible that the industry can give based on what people really, really want. And that's what made this next taking the charge strategy. So the plan, in a nutshell, is that the national government releases grants for the local government and guidance, essentially also grants to support that guidance, i.e. skills, so that EVI can be implemented locally. It is important to implement EVI locally because the local governments know their areas, right? Their people, what their people want. And so they can go and implement what is a national policy much more easily rather than the nation trying to, which is very similar to the Indian context. Things are set by the national government and the states have to go and implement it. Fantastic. Basically, the aspect that could come in is the skills part of it. There needs to be guidance and skills delivered to the local governments so that they can go and do this, right? And on the other side, the national government working with industry and independent bodies to set standards. More importantly, one set of standards that work across the nation. There will be a difference. There will be very much a difference here because it's huge. You may have different standards, but they need to be set independently with the consultation of industry. So I've already spoken about the Levi scheme. This is currently happening. There's a lot of money about to be released, which will essentially turn into £1 billion+ of investment across the sectors to, put local EVI, okay, something like that. The important bit here is the recognition of the challenge and then deciding how the delivery is going to be done. The challenge was recognized that we need high quality charge points, we need the right numbers of them in the right places, under the right commercial arrangements, okay? And then the scheme was therefore designed essentially targeting local EVI, and the industry will step in where a market has been created, okay? Ultimately, we are the technical arm that support the government to support the local governments to achieve this, essentially. And with that, I basically just want to summarize that we need to coordinate efforts to make net zero happen. Transport is still the worst performing sector. Strategic action is needed at every level, okay, especially on the infrastructure side, absolutely needed. It needs to be strategically placed so that it doesn't imbalance other factors, your other vectors of the net zero, especially energy. And then ultimately, the national level needs to work with the local level, and the local level needs to then go and implement it with a parallel stream of working with the industry to set standards, preferably a single standard where possible. Ultimately, the one thing that is not covered in this summary because it's not part of my presentation is what about R&D and looking in the future, but there are really esteemed colleagues here who are going to talk about that. And so I will leave it to them, but I will definitely say that in parallel to this plan, the UK government has been giving lots of grants, R&D grants, to see what's coming next, like wireless charging, like vehicle to grid, and so on and so forth. So that must happen in parallel with what we know now to update our knowledge so that we can adapt those policies that are going to be stale in the next 5 years. With that, I will thank you very much and hand over to.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sagar. Please. That was a very comprehensive presentation, and I particularly liked the idea, which could be relevant for us in the Indian context in terms of sharing of practices, is the combination of incentive and disincentive and gap funding through grant. And that could possibly be an interesting business model in terms of implementation. Thank you very much, Sagar. I'm sure there will be more questions and more detailed discussion going forward. May I now request Dr. Nikki Black and Professor Maggie Rowe to come up with their presentation. And my request would be if you could keep it within 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes. Lovely. Thanks. Over to you.
Okay. Sorry, I really need a box so you can see me, but I hope you can hear me at least.
You could sit and talk.
No, it's fine. First of all, we're delighted to be here. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you particularly to Mr. Peter Cook, to Mr. Mukherjee, and to all of you who've organized this and invited us. And also, I'd like to thank our partners who are here, Professor Suvanich Roy, who's here in the front, and Mr. Swastik Pal, who's working with us. He's an independent photojournalist and artist. First of all, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce the Living Deltas Hub. It's funded under the UK Global Challenges Research Fund by the UKRI. And globally, I think we know there are many people living in deltas. 500 million people live on deltas, in deltas. Their fertile floodplains are home to abundant biodiversity and rich soils. Deltas are also integral to global food supplies, fish stocks, water supplies, industry, trade and culture, some of which we've already talked about here. And in short, people's lives and the survival of many other species rely on delta sustainability. Deltas are also seen as engines for economic growth. In many deltas, people have higher GDP than those in other areas of the country. Examples are in the Gulf of Mexico, the delta of rivers Rhine and Nile, and deltas in East and Southeast Asia. However, deltas are under threat, particularly from climate change, rising sea levels, industrial farming techniques, and pollutants. As I think we understand here, we need to act now to prevent delta systems from collapsing. It's never been more important and more crucial for delta cities and countries to come together to share knowledge, experience, and expertise in addressing climate change. So we are working with partners in academia and non-academic stakeholders across 3 deltas: the Red River Delta and the Mekong Delta in Vietnam, and the Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna Delta in India and Bangladesh. We're using a systems approach with interdisciplinary methods involving social sciences, natural and physical sciences, arts and humanities, and creative cultural practices. We're working in a transdisciplinary way because solving the wicked problems facing Asian megadeltas requires a fundamentally different landscape approach that works on many scales, from the local to the whole delta. It needs more than a fix-it approach, I would suggest. And in order to understand the context, identities, meanings, and future desires to achieve delta sustainability. So we're working on a range of outputs, including research papers, as you would probably expect, reports, science advisory briefs, but also many other outputs, such as digital communications, artworks, exhibitions, films, and performances. And also outcomes which include co-produced, locally relevant policies, some of which we've talked about already today, for sustainable delta management. We're aiming to help raise the voices of Delta dwellers by working with local people and stakeholders in various different ways. In particular, we're interested in the fundamental relationships between water and people in these landscapes. And Dr. Mukherjee talked about the importance of water. Water does not only form the materiality of the landscape, but the essence of nature, of life in the deltas. Living Deltas aims to learn lessons from the past and to draw on indigenous knowledge bases to co-produce locally relevant policies for sustainable delta management. As such, natural cultural heritage lies at the heart of our thinking in this research hub. The hub asks two interrelated questions. First, what are the long-term challenges in delta communities and landscapes? And second, how are these changes accelerated in the Anthropocene? There have been huge changes over the last 30 to 50 years, in particular, at the landscape scale. We also seek to determine the key drivers behind this change and the main consequences for delta dwellers. While more data can help us to identify the extent of these changes, interpretation and communication of change is also important. We are also interested in listening to the stories being told and in how new stories might emerge, and how they can be used as the basis for communicating what is going on in the deltas with those who might be able to make change. And I would suggest that some people here are able to make change. So we're working through a number of themes and priorities that respond to the UN SDGs. The work focuses on each delta and country, but also crosses countries and deltas. We're particularly now working on locally led adaptation because we recognize that delta peoples can be considered as the first climate change adapters. Our researchers include a large number of early career researchers, such as PhDs, across the different countries, and we're also developing the capacity of our own colleagues and considering that the next generation of leaders in environmental research may come both from the delta dwellers we're working with as well as our own colleagues. Of course, the key issue is about the impact of climate change and what it is having and will have on the Sundarbans in the future. So achieving net zero is to reduce the impact of the Sundarbans and ensure that its riches are not lost and can continue to act as a carbon sink. So for example, colleagues in the hub are working on the development of an integrated risk assessment framework for delta systems. We use scenario-based analysis. We've already talked a little bit about the importance of scenarios to conceptualize and quantify the vulnerability and resilience of the 3 target delta regions. Our own small research group within this big delta, a hub, is focusing on creative cultural practices across the deltas. Cultural practices in the deltas express and reflect the relationships people have with each other and their delta landscapes. The importance of such practices and cultural forms is now recognized, of course, in various ways, notably by UNESCO, that identifies a wide range of cultural forms and how they link to SDGs. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Nick Black, who's going to talk a little bit more about the detail of the research we're doing in this area.
So thank you, first of all, to Maggie for introducing the Living Deltas, and thank you to all our Indian friends and colleagues here for inviting us to speak at today's event. I'm just briefly going to outline the work we're doing in Vietnam, because this is working in 2 deltas there, the Red River Delta and the Mekong. And for example, some of the things we're doing there, we're examining water puppetry practices using a number of different methods, such as archival research, interviews, and site visits. And what we're looking at there and finding is that despite this historical legacy and unique national location of this cultural practice, that traditional skills and knowledge embedded in water puppetry are under threat from multiple perspectives. But moving on to our work in the Sundarbans, our focus here is on the impact of climate change on communities who gather honey from wild bees within the Delta forests. We're concentrating in particular on the culture around honey gathering and the traditional practices and contemporary adaptations, the performances, rituals and stories, and how these help us to understand the relationship between humans, bees, and the Delta environment. Why bees? Well, bees and other pollinators are increasingly recognised for their critical role in environmental sustainability, particularly their part in food systems and food security. It's a frequently quoted fact that they're responsible for pollinating a third of our food. And there's a growing demand for honey, particularly wild organic honey. And yet the evidence shows that pollinators are seriously in decline, impacted by multiple causes, from intensive agriculture to a changing climate. Our work here uses interdisciplinary methods. We work alongside artists from India and Bangladesh, and with colleagues at the Indian Institute of Engineering, Science and Technology, and at Jadavpur University here in Kolkata. But most importantly, we work with the men, women, and children of the communities whose local embedded knowledge of their environment, the changes and adaptations, are critical in understanding the key drivers of change. And we're doing this through arts workshops with young people, recording traditional performances and writing new stories, creating film and photographic outputs alongside more conventional academic methods such as interviews and focus groups. And we're seeking to understand the values, knowledge, attitudes to risk, and adaptations for sustainable futures within these cultural practices, performances, stories, and rituals. From our research, we found that these cultural practices contribute to sustainability through learning and sharing of knowledge, as events which contribute to social sustainability and belonging, and as opportunities to contextualise and to contest change. And these cultures are rich in traditional knowledge of ecosystems, whether it's seasonality of flowering events, behaviour of bees or tigers, of medicines, of food. And yet these cultural contributions to sustainability are little understood and increasingly threatened by climate change and global pressures. Avenues of communication are often absent or underutilised through lack of resources or fear of being undervalued, which can lead to poor management, missed opportunities, or environmental damage even. As Maggie said earlier, these wicked problems, climate change, how we approach net zero, all require a multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral, and a multi-stakeholder approach. As recommended by the International Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, incorporating local community knowledge into land management policies is critical towards an inclusive and sustainable future. And land management is driven by cultural values, not purely economics. Honey gathering is an incredibly risky livelihood, but understanding that locally embedded attitude to risk and the values associated with seeking that livelihood within the forest should be a necessary part of designing environmental policies. We need to recognise the role that cultural practices play in sociocultural sustainability and seek to provide opportunities where communities feel valued and willing to share knowledge and play a role in governance of their own home landscapes. And it's only through addressing these gaps, bringing together local, experiential and scientific knowledge, that we can make positive advances towards addressing inequality, poverty and climate action. And that's just some of the SDGs we're trying to achieve. So just to wrap up, towards this aim, we're working on sharing stories and situations faced by these communities in the Sundarbans. And we're designing a touring and online exhibition currently called Bittersweet Tides. Through the artworks created and the embedded local and scientific knowledge, the exhibition will tell the story of the impact of climate change on the honey-gathering communities in the Delta. We'll work with local craftspeople, curators and designers to build this exhibition, which will tour not only in urban gallery settings, but back to the communities at the heart of our project. And I'd like to invite you here as an opportunity to be part of this, to add your name to this research and help us to elevate these voices from the Deltas to a wide international audience. And if there is some way you can help us make this exhibition a reality, please find a chance to speak to either myself or any of our colleagues here during the event. And thank you again to everybody for inviting us here.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Maggie Rowe and Dr. Nikki Black. It was indeed a very focused presentation, and it's good that you touched on transdisciplinary approach, and that's very important, especially on a subject like this. And you dwelt on adaptation, which is now increasingly becoming as important as mitigation going forward. But what has actually got me a little excited is about the higher GDP, as you said, in terms of the local community. And so anyway, more for the question time. Thank you very much indeed. Then we have 4 corporate presentations on case studies. The first being Mr. Surajit Majumdar, Senior General Manager and Executive Assistant to the Managing Director of Exide. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be sharing our understanding and our approach to net zero from Exide perspective. Start with a corporate overview. Many of you know that we are a leading battery manufacturer in India, having a 15,000 crore plus of market capitalization and a turnover in excess of 12,000 crore. And we have about 10 manufacturing locations, and last but not least that we have been in existence for 75 plus years. As stated by our chairman, Mr. Bharat Shah, and our MD and CEO, Mr. Subir Chakravarti, sustainability is at the heart of our operations. So we embraced the decarbonization path in the right spirit. What is our understanding of the thing? That's what we wanted to first assess. See, this graph, it's a very well-known graph which is shared in various presentations today. Is a correlation between carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere and the average rise in temperature. And if you observe from say mid-90s levels, from 0.4, which was a temperature index, it has grown, it's more than doubled in the last 25 years. So if we continue the way we are, obviously we'll reach a point where we will have a irreversible ecological catastrophe. Now we talk about this net zero. What is the net zero all about? It's a target of completely negating the amount of greenhouse gas produced by human activity. And how do we achieve it? By reducing emissions and implementing methods of absorbing carbon dioxide. Why I'm talking about carbon dioxide only? Because that's a maximum, has a maximum contribution to this greenhouse effect. So what is India's commitment? So it's, as already mentioned, I'll just mention the key points. We want to be net zero by 2070, by 2030. We want to reduce the emission intensity of its GDP by 45% from 2005 level. achieve 50% cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy resources, and sustainable lifestyles, and also initiatives to protect the poor and vulnerable from adverse impacts, and to create a forest carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2. Now, how do we proceed in a manufacturing company? How we took it up? See, there are two aspects. One is the GHG inventorization, and the other is the GHG reduction steps. So, inventorization means you have to identify the sources of your emissions. You have to adopt a calculation approach to accumulate data for a period, calculate the GHG emissions, and report. And then because you can't control something without measurement. So this is the measurement part. Then you take the actions on reduction. You establish certain performance indicators. See, on absolute terms, if you're a growing organization, it will always be, your energy consumption will always be on the up. But what about setting up an index, which is, say, intensity, like energy consumption per unit of production in some form? And setting the targets. See, unless you set targets, incorporating the KRAs of operating managers, you will not see results. And preparing action plan. It's a phased plan. And then you keep reporting. So you have to classify your emissions. There's a GHG protocol which states there are three scopes of emission. What is scope 1, which is direct GHG emissions, which happens from your consumption of fuel in your own or controlled premises, like the DG set consumption, or in a manufacturing setup you're utilizing LPG for your burners or furnaces. Scope 2 is the indirect GHG emission, which in our country is purchased electricity, the grid electricity. And scope 3 is the other indirect GHG emissions, which are not owned or controlled by your company. It's outside that boundary. The sources, see, the scope 1 I have already mentioned, scope 2 also I have also mentioned, it's grid consumption. Scope 3 is a very complicated thing. It's got 15 categories, out of which 8 are in the upstream side and 7 on the downstream side. Now, we have to for mitigating this emissions, we considered for going step by step for every scope. The scope 1 is basically direct fuel consumption. So what is that we did? So we improved energy efficiency and reduce energy consumption to the maximum, and convert thermal energy into electrical energy, which we can obviously consider from renewable sources. See, here in a manufacturing company, this GHG mitigations, if it is concurrent with cost saving approach, it becomes sustainable, and from our experience it actually gives a lot of cost benefits. Purchase electricity, that's scope 2 emissions. So reduction in energy consumption remains valid. That's one action which is always there for scope 1 and scope 2. The other is that you try to opt for renewable energy. You can go for rooftop energy, solar installations. That obviously doesn't give you much of a benefit, but this off-site renewable energy through, say, group captive model, you can really get cost benefits if the policies in the states are favorable. So we talk of net zero, but what is net zero and carbon neutrality? How are they different? See, net zero, it includes all 3 scopes of emission you have to mitigate, scope 1, 2 and 3, and it is across the organization. But carbon neutrality is only for scope 1 and scope 2. Scope 3 you can do, but it is not mandatory in carbon neutrality. And the boundary in carbon neutrality claim, you can set it in terms of your location of production or say a product, you can declare a product that is completely carbon neutral, or a certain production facility completely carbon neutral, but you cannot do it for net zero. You have to cover the entire organization with 1, 2, and 3 mitigation. See, why scope 3 is a difficult thing, but it's still important. The scope 3 is it's getting generated, say, from purchase goods and services, capital goods, it's from cradle to gate. Like, say, purchase goods, if you're buying a metal, see, from the point of extraction or mining to your gate, whatever emissions are getting generated by other organizations or stakeholders in the supply chain path, I mean, that's all included here. I mean, if you go through it in detail, you'll find, say, use of sold products. See, we are, as long as our batteries are getting used to, I mean, start engines on IC engine vehicles, we can't stop it. We will be accountable for it. So it's a global thing. It's not something you can mitigate on your own, the entire thing. You can influence some of them. Say, what we have done is that end-of-life treatment of sold products. See, we have, and waste generated in operations, we have set up 3 major recycling plants. So to mitigate that, because the moment we're using recycled material, you are actually reducing scope 3 emissions, because that part from the mine to your smelter or refiner, that portion, that emission you're cutting down. So actually what the experts say is that you start with scope 1 and 2 emissions, and that becomes your base level, and you start with a few of the scope 3 emission categories where you're confident and the data is available, because it's all indirect calculations. A lot of estimations are there. Now, estimation, you can see you may be completely wrong, but if you apply the same logic year on, there will be a trend, emerging trend, whether you're in the right path or not. In absolute terms, there can be certain variations. See, what we did as a first is that we had set up a cross-functional team for ESG, comprising of, say, people from energy management, employee health and safety, human resources, secretarial, risk management, quality management, finance. And it is the contribution of all these cross-functional team members, as outcome of that, we have been able to publish our sustainability report. We've been able to publish our BRSR report also voluntarily. And we also partnered with a consultant for our initial steps, but it is something, it's a culture which has to percolate throughout your company. The consultants on their own, they cannot give you the results. The results have to come out from your people only. The environmental initiatives, to mention a few of them, is that firstly on the green energy, we now consume 18% of our total energy consumption production from solar energy, which was only 1% 3 years back. We are further adding capacity of, say, approximately 19 megawatt, which is a combination of solar and wind. We have some carbon conscious projects going around in the factories. And as I mentioned earlier, if you see our proportion of solar rooftop capacity and the solar ground mounted off-site capacity, it surely reflects the that off-site option is the most, it can give the maximum benefit. Water, another resource. So we have taken water consumption resources, and in fact, see, the thing is that we started gathering the data. It's unconsciously people were already doing some of these activities. What we have done is that we have brought them under a common, on a common platform, started measuring, and we have seen that we have been able to reduce 8.5% of our water intensity has come down. We have, some of our plants are already on zero liquid discharge. We have reduced usage of hazardous and toxic chemicals to the extent possible in our processes. In the ETP sludge, the effluent treatment plant sludge, in certain states where we have been permitted, we have been started supplying cement plants as flux. As I mentioned, that for circular economy, we have set up 3 major recycling plants for batteries. And from a current level of about 45 to 50% of lead requirement, which we are meeting from our recycled lead, we expect to go to about 60% in a very few years. See, on the product front also, we have been making batteries for higher fuel efficiency cars, the intermittent start and stop vehicles, which are for emission reduction. We also have lithium-ion based inverters in the market, solar rooftop solutions for homes, e-rickshaw batteries, all are contributing to reducing the emissions. We have, as I mentioned, that we have already published our BRSR report, which is part of our annual report last year, and the sustainability report also. And we have our aspirations set in the sense that by 2030 we want to double our renewable energy capacity. It is not easily done. It's, there are certain policy decisions from various states which make things happen. Water management, we want to become water neutral by 2030. Waste management, achieve 100% zero waste to landfill by 2030. Green innovation, increase the percentage of captive recycled to 70% in 3 years. See, these are, the direct environmental initiatives we have taken, all the aspirations. On organizational safety level also, on a sustainability front, we want to improve unsafe actions conditions by 100% by 25. And positive community relationship, because that is something essential for sustainability. And product and process quality remains the foremost. So these are our initiatives, and this is the way we are progressing. And it is a task where we are now clearly focused. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shrujit. I think that was a very well-structured roadmap that you have, and it's very heartening to note that you are using carbon accounting in a very scientific manner. And what was also very heartening to note is that the jump from 1 or 3% to 18% renewable energy in 3 years, wonderful. The next case study would be presented by Mr. Saurav Daspatnaik, Managing Director of Swachh Environment Private Limited. Over to you, sir.
Since the chairman has given us 7 to 8 minutes, I'll have to justify my time.
I'll be really grateful.
Yeah. So, thank you. The Bengal Chamber of Commerce and the British Deputy High Commission for organizing a very excellent, apt and purposeful seminar and conference. I come from the water sector, but seldom, all of us in this house will realize how much of energy is consumed to bring the water to your doorstep. Any guesses? I don't know, but if you were to guess, of course it will differ from location to location, the pipeline length and the energy cost on a per kilowatt hour from state to state. But typically speaking, in India, the cost of bringing water in a metro city, whether it's Bengaluru or Chennai or Delhi or Kolkata, could be around 35 to 42%, the energy cost. So actually not bringing water, but you are bringing in energy to your doorstep. That's number one. What's the difference between a water line and a sewerage line. Any guesses in this hall? The difference between a water line and a sewerage line, which is the wastewater line, the water is a pressurized line. You have to maintain the pressure at any given time, that is 24/7. That means you have to pump and maintain the head, which means energy consumption on a per drop of water. Whereas the sewerage is a gravity-based system. Whereas the flow of water which is coming out of your wastewater circuit is moving with the inertia, with moving. That's the biggest difference we understand. And that's very important. So when we say water to your doorstep, it means water and energy to your doorstep. Now, having said the basic context, right, I thought I'll just, some of these, all of us know about it. And Madam from the Newcastle, I'm really honored to see the Delta economy, and we're talking about, a couple of weeks back we had a seminar in Haldia. We discussed about the sustainability issue and the challenges in the entire Gangetic Plain, especially the West Bengal and the Bangladesh on the coastal waters. India is actually going to face and facing severe water stress, and essentially northern region, western region, central region and southern region. East is slightly better off, but it's not going to be for long if you don't change. So that's why the government's thrust on water. It's one of the most ambitious projects of independent India. It changes the complete milieu of ecosystem of in India and in the rural and the urban sector. It changes the habits of our people and the way they use water and the way they use wastewater. And I said the use of wastewater, not waste as a wasteful resource. We have 4 major national missions as we talk along. The Namami Ganga, it's all familiar, the Gangetic, entire Gangetic, the river right from the Ganges and its tributaries flowing into the Bay of Bengal, into the delta, is actually giving economy of around 450 million people. That's the kind of importance, $4.8 billion being invested, of course in a staged manner. The Jal Jeevan Mission Rural, which is every house must get a tap water. That's ambitious project, and I think the West Bengal state has now geared up. In the last couple of months, they are really pumping in a lot of energy, of course finances, to put this project by 2024. And we are a part of that. The Swachh Bharat Mission with the Clean India scheme, which is the first, is ODF, open defecation free. Now we are talking about ODF++, which is managing the fecal sludge. The last mission is the Jal Jeevan Mission, the earlier called the Amrit, the Atal Mission for Renewable and Urban Transformation, now subsumed into the urban. And that's where all the municipalities and our cities and metros are going to be talking about. The humongous energy consumption going to happen going forward when you have piped water coming in for every house. So that's why water is a lifeline. Our chairman, honorable chairman, mentioned about this when he spoke in his opening address. We spoke about there are certain national ambitions at this point of time by the Ministry of Jal Shakti. The water as an energy, Jal Shakti. The difference in the earlier it used to be called water resources, now it's called Jal Shakti, water energy. A metering of connection, that means 100% of our population must be connected with house service connection. Average performance today in ULB is only 13%. The non-revenue water national benchmark, which we are planning to have around 20%, it's hovering over 33%, maybe over 40% now. Continuity of supply, when I said 24/7 is a myth currently in the Indian context. None of the cities in India supply water on a 24/7. It's intermittent supply. But ideally we want to be there at 24/7, like Thames water, like Anglian water, like many other developed countries. Today, average consumption or supply is 3 hours in a day. Cost of recovery of the water and the wastewater economy, that is the complete closed loop cycle we are talking about, is 100% today. I don't see much economy in that, about 30 to 40%. And tariff efficiency, that means if I'm supplying water, is there a tariff model? Are we going to pay for it? Or we're not going to pay for it? Or who pays for it? So that's a very fundamental question here. When you're pumping in 35% of your energy cost into the water, when you pay for water, when you pay for energy, you also need to pay for water as well. Of course, it's an issue which is on the political front, where I'm not going to be interfering in that area. But it also needs a lot of maturity of our end users and the regulatory push and technology framework. Non-revenue water, and I wanted to just move into the water which is supplied minus the water billed. In many cities you don't bill water, it's free, so it is non-revenue water. But somebody else pays for it. Somebody surely pays for it. But as we move along, the industry is getting hungry for water. The agriculture is the largest consumption of water today, followed by the domestic and industry. A lot of industries across the country, and we are fortunate enough in Bengal, and I think we should be giving a brand of our state as industrialization as one of the key points where you have lots of water available, which is not available in other parts of the country, and that's a myth. Chennai, Tirupur, Hosur, Kodaikanal, Shimla, Mangalore, lots of cities facing problem of water, and industries are getting closed because of water supply. We are very fortunate to have industries who have abundant water supply. Today, if you see the non-revenue water, and we did a survey along with Terry, there was an average of around 40 to 43% is the non-revenue water in the Indian cities. One of the lowest is Trivandrum, and Delhi scores very high, being the capital city, is over 50%. So absolutely in a situation where we are, how do we see the current trend? How do we manage the net zero? How do we achieve that? It's a transition, it's a journey. And why the water sector is going to happen. One of the most important factors is the non-revenue water. Second is the asset management of our existing water infrastructure, both the sewerage and the water pipelines and the water works. And as we know in India, the ULBs and the municipalities are delivering the water to your doorstep. And occasionally and often we have found the asset monitoring mechanism, the energy efficiency of the entire water works system is never monitored and measured. I think our chairman mentioned, Mr. Modi mentioned, data analytics and predictability in our asset in terms of our reliability and energy efficiency. So measurement is very important. And of course, distribution from intermittent to 24/7 with network management, both at the ULB level and at the district level. Calcutta is well poised, at the same time, a lot of abundant water supply, but as a city, it has one of the most challenging tasks of growing salinity in the coastal areas. As a result, the water which is going to be available here and the delta is going to be saline, is going to be a major challenge for us as you go along. So how we are going to move along from a water works perspective, measuring the pressure, the leakage management, command and control center, metering and billing. So quickly, I will just say a case study of Haldia being in West Bengal. We are the largest PPP partner of the government of West Bengal and running the largest PPP, and this is the 9th largest PPP in the country. 50 million gallons per day with 2 plants. We've actually revamped the entire waterworks, which is a 40-year-old waterworks of the Public Health Engineering Department. It's a case study today. And this has been awarded to us for a 15-year PPP project. And Haldia, as you know, is a port. It's also an industrial city. It's a very important and vital industrial center for the state. We have about 400,000 domestic consumers and is supplying to the municipality. Apart from that, we are also supplying to the entire industry. Now, if you see the case study out here, I think the graph may not be clear, but what I wanted to highlight is when we talk about energy efficiency as a very important factor for our entire waterworks and pumping, we found the kilowatt hour and the cost per kL of energy. We brought it down. We tried to measure with the same old pumps. We didn't change it initially. And thereafter, we went in a transition to change the pump, and now we're transitioning to energy efficiency. Motors as well, it needs a capital investment. So since there is no capital subsidy from the state, we as a private partner is doing that. So I would be very happy, Mr. Modi, if we can come up with some viability gap funding, along with the state, we can work out very innovative financial models out here. So what are the benefits on the net zero? This is a journey for us. It's only 3 years right now, but I think we have reduced the non-revenue water from 27 to 17% with the help of the public and the industry at large. There's been an increase in 94% in our increase in consumers and the supply as well. Over 80% of our consumers now have meters. So there is some work to be done. A reduction in physical losses in the water treatment plant, which is a very old one, service and service delivery, and formation of DMA. So energy consumption has reduced significantly, but we are still in the... One of the important points which I wanted to ask our Additional Chief Secretary was to see whether this kind of water works can be also, supported on the renewable energy. We have enough land there. We have been given the proposal to the government of West Bengal to give us a kind of a net metering scenario, but unfortunately we have not been yet successful. I hope it will be successful. Second case study, the Delhi Jal Board, Nangli Water Services, another PPP project. But here I'm happy that the Delhi government supported us to put up solar, and net metering is now happening both on the rooftop level as well as almost 2.5 megawatts of power being generated. This is a very large PPP, one of the 4th largest PPP in the country, covering 1.2 million people, 129 square kilometers, more than 2,500 kilometers of pipeline. This is about 1,600 kilometers we have laid down. And when we took over, this was the worst performing area. Almost 79% of non-revenue water. And after significant fight, still we are at 48, and I can tell you it's not a good story. But in Delhi, as you know, water is free up to 20 KL. So there are lots of political issues which we have to address as we move along. So typically, case study of non-revenue water has been brought down by 26%. Connections from around 81,000 to 276,000 connections, more than almost huge increase in our, the coverage. Volumes billed, 196% increase. That means the revenue losses to the state has been reduced. Customer satisfaction increased by over 60%. The pipeline length has been increased by 122%, and operator rate has increased by 32%. So again, increase in the viability of the project, and collection efficiency over 124%. So there was a leakage of revenues in the state at that point of time. And power consumption has been reduced by 15%. So essentially what I'm trying to tell you, what is the roadmap for any water utility, whether it's a ULP driven or a PPP partner. See your current assets without even changing can give you better output. Formation of the district metering areas, non-revenue water management, losses in the treatment plant, losses in the networks, and metering. Metering is to be done, as we say, what gets measured gets done, and reduction in power and efficiencies. So this is broadly the entire story. 2 case studies. I think a lot of work has been done, but more work needs to be done. With these few words, I over to the chairman, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Saurav. That was a very comprehensive presentation. Water is a very, very challenging area to work on. Happy to note that you are doing some incredible work. The biggest challenge is equity, equitable supply of water, accessibility and equity. And of course, we do not have a pressurized system. So low pressure system, how do you really make things work? There are some ideas, we can save it for some other time for discussion. And of course, the big challenge about metering. Anyway, we shall address these issues later. But when you talk about non-revenue water, there is a lot of unaccounted for water that's very much there in the system as well. So that differentiation needs to be made. Anyway, Now, the next case study is from Mr. Anirban Ghosh. Anirban, nice to see you, though virtually. It's been a long, long time since we last met. Over to you, Anirban, for your presentation.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for this opportunity to be a part of this conversation. Sorry that I couldn't make it to Calcutta today. I must acknowledge that there's no better partner than UK for a conversation like this, because I remember when listening to a presentation by the Climate Change Committee of the UK, it seemed that the level of clarity on what needed to be done was probably the highest I'd ever heard in any government platform ever. It's good to know that that knowledge has spread and that our country is doing very well in this area as well. As we discuss net zero, it is important to note that the problem that we are all trying to solve is a giant pollution problem. Everything we mention as solutions actually addresses some kind of pollution that we create in the course of our life. Which is why the important point to discuss, the important issue to discuss is climate solutions. We have come to a stage today where we can go beyond talking about what must be done to what can be done, and things that can be done today and things that will become possible in the near future. Many of the solutions have got discussed in the conversation already. Renewable energy and electric vehicles and water efficiency and energy efficiency and so on. And there are plenty more that are coming online which we are aware of, such as clean hydrogen, such as clean materials, many recycling solutions, some of which we say are a little bit expensive today, but if you look at the way technologies move, very soon they will become economically feasible and ready to be scaled. Most of the solutions end up impacting energy in some form or the other. And it is only right that it does so, because if you were to take the energy component of the pollution created from every single solution or every single thing that we do in our lives, the impact on emissions from generation and consumption of energy is 74%. Deva, if I remember correctly, you mentioned it in your opening address. So whatever we do ends up impacting the way we generate or consume energy. Or I should say almost anything that we do ends up impacting this. And this is why it is important to look at this solution space through the lens of systems thinking. I know there have been, you've just heard a very good example of the water energy nexus. But let me make it a little bit more personal. In your own bathroom, you possibly have a mixer to mix hot water and cold water. If you have chosen to have two separate taps for a separate one for hot water and a separate one for cold water, and then have to operate them to get the right balance, you are causing more climate pollution than you need to. Because every time you do this, there's a large amount of water that gets wasted. This water has to be pumped, therefore there's a lot of energy that has to be generated. And because of this generation, there are emissions and so on and so forth. So if we were to move from this two-tap solution to a single lever solution, we would immediately start saving water while we were having a bath, and therefore reduce the need for pumping and reduce the need for energy. If you push it further back, if we consume more energy, it means the amount of renewable energy capacity we have to create will be much greater than if we were to do energy efficiency and water efficiency projects and solutions, adopt them in our regular life. And if we were to do that, we would in turn reduce the need for batteries for storage, which in turn would reduce the possible pollution at the end of life of the batteries, and would give us a chance to be able to bring the materials from batteries back again into use. So this whole thing is so closely connected to each other that if you were to adopt a method of systems thinking, we would be able to have far greater impact on climate than by looking at initiatives individually. Even as we explore climate solutions, every one of our industries is going to be hit by a technology revolution of some kind or the other. Most of the products that an electrical engineering company sells today, appliance companies especially, didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago because of the pace at which energy efficiency has proceeded. In our own factory, we replaced upwards of 3,000 motors that were working perfectly well and have been working probably for the last 50 years. Now we have alternatives which have 30 to 40% better energy efficiency than these perfectly good old working motors of the past. So what can organizations do? To my mind, there are two things. One is to become net zero within its operations, and the second is to provide climate solutions. Now, climate solutions include the solutions we heard for battery a little earlier in this conversation, and then renewable energy and a whole bunch of them. So let me just give you a glimpse into some of the climate solutions that the Mahindra Group has already invested in. One, of course, is electric vehicles. You know that the transition to electric vehicles will only accelerate, especially as battery prices come down. And very soon, you and I will all have electric cars, a conversation that Bengal Chamber often hosts in various conferences that it organizes. The Mahindra Group also has invested in solar energy, in setting up capacity, in building green buildings.
Yeah. Tech team, please.
So I think that I think disruption is on that side.
Yeah, possibly from that side, is it? That was indeed, Anirban's presentation always brings in a breath of fresh air. You know, he can always, and I have noticed this, I know him for a long time, he always has a very interesting perspective to any subject, to any deliberation that you have. And so, can that be fixed? Or now this becomes a real issue. Right. I think, shall we put him, is Angona there? Or Sushmita, can we put Anirban on hold for the time being, because we're also running a bit late, and request Mr. Pankaj Gupta.
Am I audible?
Now you have come back.
Okay.
Yeah, please carry on.
And every year, we do about 1 million plus trees in Andhra Pradesh in the Araku Valley to sequester residual emissions that the business will always have. But this is not enough. There's lots more to do. As you know, if you were to put together all the actions being taken by companies and countries today, emissions are still increasing. We have not yet bent the curve. So there is a lot more to do. A lot more to do by implementing the solutions that are available today. If we have done 10 units, probably it is possible to do 1,000. And that should be the first goal, to implement what is currently possible, adopt solutions that are economically feasible today. And then, of course, go forward and start implementing the newer solutions as they become available over time. And this is where businesses have an opportunity. Just as an example, I mean, if we don't move into electric vehicles, the automobile business itself will be at stake. You could ask the same question about what technological change will necessitate a transition for you or put your business at risk. You could also ask the question, is there a new climate technology that gives the business an opportunity to grow in the future? These are important questions to ask. And these are the things that we need to do if we wish to be successful in getting to net zero. We are already on the path, lots of things are happening, but a lot more needs to be done, and a lot more needs to be done very quickly, because we've got a time limit. This is not one of those things that we can take forever for, because if we do not limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is, of course, we're saying that it's going to be extremely difficult to do. But if we don't limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade, we are going to see a lot of cataclysmic events, which includes the Mumbai-Bandra Worli sea link going underwater, and perhaps even the area in which I live being completely inundated, if Google simulations are to be believed. So let me stop there by saying that the path to net zero is something we are on, but we need to do a lot more for, and it is important to adopt the solutions that we can today and also ensure that more solutions become available and prove to be an opportunity for business. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Anirban. Thank you. Thank you. As I was saying, I don't know if you heard it, you always bring in a breath of fresh air and a new perspective to any deliberation, and I've heard you on a number of occasions.
I'm unable to hear you. I hope you heard me.
We can hear you. Oh, again, there's a bit of a problem. Can you hear us now? Possibly not. Anyway, that was a very interesting presentation or storytelling, shall we say, from Anirban, and suggesting some very practical solutions, including shower mixer. So very practical. Thank you very much. The last speaker is Mr. Pankaj Kumar Gupta from NTPC. Sir, may I request you to restrict your presentation to, I don't know, shorter the better? Let's put it like that. So maybe in about 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, sir. So, yes, anything you want? No project. So I don't have presentation, don't worry, sir. So, namaskar and good afternoon. So as happened, the last speaker having too much pressure from Ghosh side and then from the audience side, because they are thinking I am standing in between of your lunch and between you. So don't worry, I will take less time. And similar thing I'm thinking that similar thing happened like in carbon and whatever thing in this thing, because India has contributed very less, 3 to 4%. So like similar things. Then what happens? The population is 17%, and now you know that even as on today per capita consumption in India is around 1/3 of the world average. So these things is there, but as a responsible citizen, we are going for the net zero and carbon neutrality. Similar thing I will do, that I will finish my this speech in 10 minutes, so that you will don't feel that So my point is that people are not only talking about the net zero, now in world is talking about the net positive also. Earlier we were talking about the carbon neutrality, net zero, but now people are talking about the net positive also, because so whatever contributed earlier, so like big company like Google, and they are thinking they will compensate the previous year compensation also. So as we are discussing from the morning, that now we are passing through the transition phase. Probably this is the most important transition phase in the history of modern civilization. So when I say we, that means everyone, whether it is individual or company or sector or country or entire world. So as morning Ghosa was telling, that transition should be the country specific. So if you see in India, we are having the multiple transitions. That is the demographic transition that leads the demand for the job creation, and then agrarian and urbanization transition, and then rapid infrastructure growth. So it means all are three. It is the energy intensive transition, and entire energy sector is passing through the transition phase on account of the climate change. So that means energy sector is facing big challenges due to this transition. And you know, energy sector is a backbone of the economy, and the power sector is the backbone of the energy sector. NTPC is a backbone of the Indian power sector. As you know, that NTPC is generating around 25% of the power of the country. That means out of 4 bulbs, 1 bulb is from NTPC we are generating. And that means we have a very huge responsibility on our shoulder to provide the energy security to the country, to sustain the economic growth, to sustain the employment and livelihood in the country, and to sustain the environment-friendly lifestyle, ultimately contributing the goal of climate change mitigations. So that means NTPC have to do the transition, and currently, you know, because we have the mainly fossil-fired power generation, so more than 80% is the coal and gas. So that means we are generating very high carbon as of now. So this is we are considering this is the opportunity, not much challenge, because whatever challenges come, so we should encash that opportunity. That is our goal. So what, as you know, currently NTPC having the 71,500 megawatt, and that in the east and northeast, we are around 40,000 megawatt. Our power generation is there. So what we are doing, I will tell you in our journey, that what measure we are taking care. So first we are doing to reduce the carbon emission. First we are doing the fuel diversification, and for that we are planning 60 gigawatt renewable capacity out of 130 gigawatt targeted by 2032. That means around 50%. As of now, we are having very low RE, but we are planning to add the 60,000 megawatt RE capacity. So that we can, and other than this, we are also working towards that carbon neutral fuel like biomass, green hydrogen, green ammonia, and CO2 based methanol, and also carbon capture utilization. Then come to in the morning we are talking about the efficiency and upgradation. So whatever the power plant which are old, so we are going for the R&M, and so that we can increase their efficiency, so that the carbon emission will be less. We are also, earlier we are providing the subcritical technology. Now we are going to subcritical to supercritical, and then supercritical to ultra supercritical, and also which is technology which is not available around the world, but we are developing that technology that is called advanced ultra supercritical technology, which works on the 700 degree centigrade and 700 degree centigrade, which we have working and developing with the IJCAR, BHL and NTPC together. If it developed, then that means we are increasing very high efficiency and 20% less carbon emission from the subcritical, if you compare that. And also we are telling all the time coal is bad, but coal is black also. So we are telling that we wanted to make a blue coal power plant. That means if we reduce the emission from coal power plant to the equivalent to gas power plant, which is like in Europe it is there. So that then we are targeting for that, and which if you can do that, that means it will be equivalent to the gas power plant, and we can tell that blue coal power plant. And that emission from 800 at present, from 1 unit of electricity, 800 grams we are emitting the carbon, so that can be reduced to 550 grams. And this can be done by using the co-firing of the carbon neutral fuel like biomass, methanol, municipal solid waste, sewage treatment plant sludge, etc. and partial that carbon capture. Now come to the repurposing of thermal asset. What happens because of the high renewable RE integration, this power plant we have to require to run at the lower load, so that we can accommodate this RE. And then also then it is required, then we have to ramp up and ramp down. So we are aligning this and redesigning the thermal assets so that we can accommodate the RE, which is very low or no carbon point. Now come to the carbon capture. So we are also doing the carbon capture, but we are believing that carbon capture and utilization, not storage. As NTPC, so we have already put one plant, carbon capture plant, that is carbon capturing from the flue gas. And 20 ton per day, that carbon capture plant we have already commissioned in Vindhyachal. And from that, we will make the methanol by integrating with the hydrogen. So then methanol can also be fired in the boiler. So this will help the reducing the carbon. Then next come to the, everybody talking about the, and we are also working the many use of the CO2, so that we can use that it is aggregate, carbonated aggregates, and also we are with our Nitra working with the IIT Mumbai, finding the wherever the storage can be done. So then CCUS, it will be better for India because storage is very less in India. Then come to the biomass. In India, when we are talking about biomass, in India we are having the agro biomass. Like UK, we are utilizing the wood-based biomass, but in India we are having the very high agro-based biomass. So we are doing that in NTPC. We have already started co-firing of biomass, and up to 10% we have capability we have developed. Now we are developing up to 20%, and then we are planning to the 100% biomass. Like UK Drex plant is there, so we will also trying to that, but that is based on the agro base, not wood base. Similarly, we are also utilization of green ammonia and green methanol, as I told earlier. Then come to the, because nuclear is very important thing. So nuclear is also, we are, NTPC is already tied up with the, made a JV with the NPCIL. So in the morning, somebody is talking about the SMR. So we are also going for the developing SMR with the BARC. And also we are having the planning to put 2 plants in Chutka and Mahi with NPCIL in nuclear power plant. Now very important thing come to hydrogen. Everybody talking about the hydrogen nowadays. So this hydrogen was already available earlier also, but it come in focus because of this net zero and because of the decarbonization. Now if you know the hydrogen, how much energy it is having. So 1 kg of hydrogen is equal to the 10 kg of coal, of Indian coal if I tell. And then 1 kg or hydrogen, you can tell 3 kg of oil. So that means it is having very high energy. So that's why people are thinking this can be utilized very good. And then people are giving the color of in the hydrogen. That means green hydrogen we want to utilize. That means that when we produce green hydrogen, the mostly from the electrolyzers or from water electrolysis. But challenge is in water electrolysis that you can, it requires a huge quantity of water, discussing the problem of the water. So that means, so NTPC we are doing research, so that if we can make this electrolysis from the sea water efficiently, then it will be more useful, because we don't have much water. Maybe West Bengal some water is there, but other places we are having the scarcity of water. Second problem is, for making 1 kg of hydrogen, we required 55 unit of electricity for electrolysis. So that means huge energy requirement is there. So we are also developing, and nowadays we are having the PM and technology and alkaline. So we are trying to make that solid oxide technology, which can be give the more things. So, so we are NTPC developing many projects in the hydrogen. Also we are working on the fuel cell and running the buses, and also based on that we are going for the microgrid in Leh, Ladakh. Now we come to the integrated waste management and energy conservation. From waste to we are making many items like charcoal. So that in Banaras we have already established the 600 ton per day MSW. So from that we are making the charcoal, and then charcoal can be used. And now NTPC also going in the energy storage, which is very important for when we want to integrate the RE, because RE is coming for some time, not for all the times. That without storage we cannot go anywhere. So that's why NTPC is working in the pump hydro, and we are already allocated around 11,500 megawatt. So we are working on that, and we have already initiated that setting up the battery storage 3,000 megawatt hour. And then EV we have already discussed. People are working in the morning. People are talking about the offshore. So NTPC also working in that, asking government that they should allocate to offshore power plants so that we can work on. And Nivej already coming for 1 gigawatt offshore power plants, because in India it is very important. We have very big coastal area, so that is there. And specific to the, now if you come to the east and northeast part, so as we are discussing that there similar things can be happen, and like we have the solar here insulation is there, but people are coal, they are not installing. So rooftop it can be put in. Biomass energy, which I discussed, can be utilized. And NTPC also having many plants, so we will try to implement these things. So as we understand that we can say that there are huge and diverse opportunity before us to venture from power to much broader energy domain, and a new domain to downstream chemical industry. So I urge that with all stakeholders to come forward and hold each other hand to make the transition successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta, for telling us the plan of NTPC. No discussion, no dialogue on energy matters, for that matter, in the country would be complete without NTPC's presence and NTPC's inputs. And heartening to note that you are working on all the fronts in terms of the transition to a clean and better future. Unfortunately, we are running quite a bit. I don't know, you all must be very hungry now. Is it? Does the panel feel that 1 or 2 questions can be taken, or should we take it offline over lunch? No, I can see there are quite a few hands. What's the general consensus? Would you, 1 or 2 questions, please. But very pointed question, very specific, and tell us who it is addressed to. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Anirban Datta, Joint Director Secretary, West Bengal State Center of the Institution of Engineers, India.
Yes.
My question is directed to Mr. Pankaj Kumar Gupta, that as the Indian power scenario is still dominated by coal-based thermal power generation, so in near future, for utilization of high-ash coal in India, and also to cater the SOx and NOx problem, replacing the old PF fire boiler with CFBC boilers, will that do any help in reducing the carbon emission?
No, purpose of CFBC is different. CFBC can take the broader range of the fuel. So now if you install the new power plant, there you can think of that whether it is economical, because earlier there was no norm of the SOx and NOx. So CFBC has advantage that they require less SOx equipment, less NOx equipment, so that cost comparison can be useful. But for subbituminous coal, which can be fired in our boiler, that PC fired boiler, so that is not much required, but depend, whenever you wanted to new power plant, then you can think of.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Chambu Shurai. So I have one little question. So you know,
who is it addressed to, please?
Yeah.
Who are you addressing the question to?
Majumdar, Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Mojumdar.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my question is, solar cell. So we are talking about solar cell. Okay. So solar cell is a very important thing now for renewable sources. But are we happy? Because in future, this coal is not around of us. Then it will fulfill our requirement. If you're talking about efficiency, the efficiency is very small. So my question, is there any technology or is there anything, any material in cloudy time or any rainy time increment the energy or you
The
can
efficiency. The efficiency.
Yeah, efficiency.
Yeah. I think lot of work is happening on that.
Actually, we have partnered with a developer. In fact, that's the way to go, because we are not in the business of generating solar energy. Their expertise is available. We have gone into group captive schemes where you hold 26% plus equity, and that's how we are doing it. So we are just paying for the power.
Yeah. No, there are initiatives that are being taken up. Let me add my two-penny bit. There are initiatives being taken up in improving power conversion efficiency, PC.
Yeah.
And other material. There's a lot of development happening internationally on material science to go for perovskites and other materials, semiconductor ink and microgroove technology. In fact, there is a company called PowerRoll in the UK where I'm a part of that company as an investor, where they are going for a new technology in terms of generating or doing away with the challenges that you are facing and increasing efficiency. Any other question?
Yeah, sir, I have got a question.
We'll take it up later.
Just a minute.
Just specific. Water. One of the biggest crises.
Yeah, we know that. What's the question, sir?
Yeah. Water recovery system as well as the management system is challenging. Now, the question is membrane-based separation technology is one of the solutions to remove the arsenic at the same time the drinking water system.
Yes, membrane-based, yes.
None I have heard here in the lecture how the modifications of the membrane system will be carried out in future to optimize that process. Thank you, sir.
Right. Would you like to respond?
I think, as far as the technology is concerned, there are very nascent technologies which is coming up is your graphene, which is coming up. But membrane-based technology, which is we talk about, the normal RO, is actually not a good idea because it wastes a lot of water. And I think RO in Delhi is being banned. So I think membrane with some amount of high efficiency and recovery is the way forward.
Foreign technology, not
possible in our country. And technology, yes.
Sir, I have got a question to NTPC that he is telling lot regarding the water utilization. Have you measured anything anywhere how much water you are using for various purpose? And is this the property of water is correct or not?
Who's the question addressed to?
NTPC.
No, I'm not getting.
Yeah, Mr. Gupta,
Because
a
you
quick
are telling,
reply. We need to close the session.
lot regarding the water utilization, So, Mr. Gupta, sorry.
Water?
Yeah.
Can you repeat your question?
Have you measured the water quality and water volume which you are going to utilize for various purpose and their utilization in various fields? Because you are telling that reduction of water utilization in various aspects.
No.
Can you take it up, separately?
Have you got any answer?
I will tell you. For water, for power plant, so this power plant water is required 3 meter cube per megawatt.
I am also from a water power plant, CESC, an energy auditor also. That's why I am feeling your discussion interesting. That's why I am telling you the utilization factor and volume.
We will discuss offline.
Yeah, offline it can be discussed. We have another quick question from Anirban. You wanted to ask a question, I understand. To the panel? Anirban, are you there?
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't want to ask the question.
Okay.
The conversation was going on water and various aspects of it. I wanted to highlight one possibility.
Yes.
That we can cut per capita usage of fresh water in urban areas by 50%.
How?
So one, the norm in urban areas is 140 kiloliters per person per day. 135. That's how we design our buildings.
Yes.
We've discovered that if you use low flow fixtures, if you use the right mixers, you use dual flush and things like that, it is possible to live comfortably in a building with 90 kiloliters per day, which is down from 140 to 90.
So water conservation is that what you are suggesting through technology intervention, products that bring about a rational use of water?
That's just one part of the solution. 40% of the fresh water we buy goes down the flush.
Yep.
The same thing happens in our houses. So if we have recycled water for the flushes, then the per capita consumption of fresh water in buildings can come down to 70 kiloliters per day. That's the scale in which we can reduce fresh water consumption, and you can think of the benefits it has in terms of pumping and energy use and emissions and so on.
Excellent.
In agriculture, micro irrigation is the one technology where again you can cut by 30-35%. So that's the scope we have of making sure that we don't have water scarcity in this country.
Absolutely. No, point well taken. I suppose we need to close this session now and break up.
And I would request Mr. Deb Mukherjee to please present tokens of appreciation to the speakers on the dais. And to Mr. Ghosh, we'll be sending it to your office.
We shall send the goodies to you, Anirban.
Wonderful. And maybe you can even order my lunch.
Yeah, I'll see you in Bombay. I'm coming there tomorrow evening.
Thank you very much for having me. I'll leave now.
Mr. Ghosh, can you just wait for, a couple of minutes or maybe 5, then we can take a group photograph?
Oh, sure.
The photograph is wildlife photography of Sundarbans. The mementos are both from Bengal Chamber and from British Deputy High Commission, Kolkata. That's why Mr. Das Patnaik, Mr. Deb Mukherjee were very much ours, but we are presenting to you also. Maybe Hoimonti and I can also share. So, I would request a photo opportunity with the speakers on the dais and Mr. Anirban Ghosh on screen.